Hi, everybody. I'm Vladimir Jutin. We are watching all the news happening in the United States and around the world. Check out these monitors. These are feeds coming into the CBS News Broadcast Center from all of our stations and affiliates around the country. If there's news happening out there, we're going to spend the next hour breaking it down right here in Studio 55. So let's begin. President Trump and Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenskyy meet face-to-face today at the White House. It's not the first time. It actually is the first time since the president blamed Ukraine for starting the war that Russia actually started. And he also called Zelenskyy a dictator, but then said he didn't remember that he had done that. So we're going to tell you what to expect from that high-stakes meeting. And a 24-hour economic blackout, why one grassroots organization is urging people not to spend any money today as an act of resistance, and which major corporations they are targeting. Plus, a notorious Mexican drug lord who was wanted for more than 40 years is now on U.S. soil. Details about his transfer along with dozens of other cartel members. This is CBS News 24/7. We're about an hour away from the highly anticipated meeting between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy and President Donald Trump. The leaders are expected to sign a deal to grant U.S. access to Ukraine's rare minerals. It's the first time they will face each other since a string of comments by Trump calling Zelenskyy a dictator. He also blamed him for a war that he actually didn't start because Vladimir Putin actually started it. CBS News correspondent Natalie Brand is live from the White House to break down what we can expect from this morning's meeting. Natalie, you have a preview for us.
Good morning, Vlad.
Hey.
Yeah, and it was just a week ago that we were talking about this escalating public feud between President Trump and Ukraine's President Zelenskyy. As you noted, the president here in the United States has blamed Ukraine for a prolonged war following Russia's invasion 3 years ago. And yesterday, notably, the president ahead of this meeting tried to walk back a bit that dictator comment, questioning whether he said it. So that's where we start going into this meeting. Of course, the Trump administration is pushing for a ceasefire peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. Ukraine, for its part, of course, pushing for security guarantees to protect its sovereignty and its land. And it's very unclear at this point what that ultimate deal could look like. But really, what's at stake today is this other agreement pertaining to rare earth minerals and trying to develop a partnership between the United States and Ukraine on that front. Of course, we are talking about critical assets that, are in everything from electronics to military equipment, fighter jets. So this is critical, the White House believes, for national security and the economy.
So let's talk about that minerals deal. What more can you tell me about that and why the U.S. is pursuing it?
Yeah, well, right now, China dominates the market when it comes to production and also processing of rare earth minerals. It's estimated about 90% of the processing comes from China. So the U.S., even going back to the Biden administration, has been trying to look for ways to bolster its own supply chain and diversify to try to reduce the reliance on China. I talked to an expert from the Center for Strategic and International Studies about the strategy by the Trump administration. Take a listen.
The big challenge is that we only have about 1.5% of the world's rare earths, so we source a lot of them from abroad. The final agreement is essentially an establishment of a fund, and the fund takes 50% of the revenue generated by future mineral assets and puts them into a fund that can be used to fund investment in Ukraine.
And Gracelyn Basker in there, she says what's important to note is mining takes time. It could take up to 20 years to develop a mine and then even determine, whether it's fruitful and yields benefits. So we still have a long way to go. And obviously, another big question for private sector investment in this endeavor would be security and stability in the region.
Let me ask you something about this federal judge that has ruled that the mass firings by the administration of these probationary government workers is likely illegal. So this is really kind of an interesting development here, Natalie. Explain that to our audience.
A major development in a court ruling late last night out of San Francisco, and it was a ruling from the bench. So what we are still waiting to see is the details of this court order. But we know that the judge in Northern California, the federal judge, as you noted, he ruled that the mass firings of these probationary employees was likely illegal, and he granted some temporary relief. But you know, it really remains to be seen what that means for the probationary employees who were already terminated, the thousands of them. I spoke to someone from one of the unions involved in filing this suit, and he said they're still eagerly awaiting, the details of this, trying to sort through what it means in practice moving forward. And also important to note that this was just the first phase of this. There's another hearing scheduled next month to further hear this case. So hopefully more details on the implications very soon.
All right, Natalie, always great to have you. Thank you very much. There is a new CBS poll that shows a majority of Americans feel like prices on goods have gone up in the last few weeks. 77% of those say their income is not keeping up with inflation. Well, today, a social media campaign is asking Americans to participate in what's being called an economic blackout by not spending money online or in person as consumers struggle to keep up with those rising costs. So CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady is here with me in Studio 55 to talk more about this. So first of all, Kelly, and I asked you this earlier on CBS Mornings, explain who's behind this movement and what they're trying to do.
Okay, so the group behind it is the People's Union USA, and it really started on social media tapping into this frustration of Americans that prices are really high. And so the whole idea behind this is don't go shop, don't go spend your money. And if you do have to, try and shop small. And so the other piece of this, though, is there's another faction that has piggybacked off of this movement. Sometimes these things, they have a life of their own and they evolve, and they are targeting companies that have rolled back their DEI efforts. So there's kind of two prongs that are happening right now, but it was originally about the injustices that people are feeling in the economy.
So is the idea that you target big companies like Walmart and Amazon and that you go shop because people still need to eat and they still need to make purchases, even though it's just one day, encouraging people to use like brick and mortar local shops in their neighborhoods?
That's right. I mean, actually, the founder is saying, like, look, if you can just not spend it all, don't go get gas, don't go do anything. But really, if you have to, don't go to Walmart, don't go to Amazon. And the idea is that these corporations, they've had record profits in some cases, but the average American is still struggling, and to try and, withhold your dollars and show your frustration.
So I asked you this earlier, which is we all recall the boycotts of the 1960s during the civil rights era. Those boycotts were sustained. They lasted over many weeks, in some cases many months. And ultimately, many of those companies capitulated. It's Friday.
I got
capitulated. The question here is these are multi-billion-dollar corporations. Is even one day going to affect their bottom line?
Well, I think it's going to be even difficult to quantify whether it has an impact because these companies aren't releasing daily sales numbers. Now, there is a plan to target these companies in weeks in the future, do an all-week blackout at Walmart, at Amazon, if this does continue to get traction. I will say there's a lot of buzz on social media, but it is sometimes hard to translate that into action. So we're going to be monitoring that. But I will know, you and I actually talked about this earlier, sometimes these boycotts have been successful in recent years. People were very frustrated with Bud Light.
Yes.
And they made that known by not buying Bud Light.
Yep.
But Bud Light is a very targeted brand. This is a little bit more vague, and retail experts I'm talking to are saying, well, it might be hard for people just to completely boycott Walmart if that's the only place in their area where there's a grocery store, essentially.
It's interesting, too, because I don't know. I was saying this earlier to Gayle King and Tony DeCopo. I got like 5 or 6 text messages from people that I know all over the United States saying, hey, there's this boycott happening. I don't know if that happened to you, but because Gayle was wondering if this was really going to have any impact. And I said, I think people are aware of what's going on. So we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, one day, right? It's hard, but if it does have that sustained impact like you saw with Target or a Bud Light, you could see something happen.
You got some new data on personal expenditures for America. What are you saying?
Okay, good news and bad news. Good news is the inflation rate that the Fed loves to track, this is their favorite one, came down a little bit. Okay. The bad news is the increase is coming from your need-to-haves, your housing, your utilities, your food, your gas. People actually also spent less, dropped 0.2%. We actually expected that to increase. So that dovetails into everything we've been talking about, consumer confidence and that anxiety about the economy.
So red flags. We're talking
bit.
about red flags.
Yeah.
All right, Kelly, always great to have you. Thank you very much. Good seeing you. All right, word from the Vatican this morning. Pope Francis will not be able to lead his followers at services opening the Christian season of Lent next week. The Vatican is making other plans, I guess, is what it's trying to say in the teleprompter, for Wednesday, Ash Wednesday. But the Pope is said to be making continued progress in his fight against double pneumonia. CBS News foreign correspondent Chris Livesay joins us now from Rome to talk more about this. Chris, a lot of people were hoping that the Pope's condition was improving. Doesn't sound great that he's not going to be able to lead next week, specifically for Ash Wednesday. So what is that backup plan?
Yeah, so bad news for people expecting to see Pope Francis for Ash Wednesday. That's the event kicking off the Lenten season leading up to Easter. But overall, it's still good news for Pope Francis, coming from Vatican sources, that he continues to improve. We found out today that he's mixing high-flow oxygen with lower flow oxygen, and that all goes back to this weekend when he had that prolonged respiratory crisis, something of an asthma attack that required high flow oxygen, even blood transfusions. So to hear that they're winnowing him off of that high flow oxygen is a very good sign. Nevertheless, he's still an 88-year-old man with double pneumonia, and he only has 1.5 lungs because of a condition he suffered as a young man back in the 50s when he had to have part of a lung removed. So he's definitely not out of the woods. His prognosis is still reserved or guarded, meaning doctors still can't predict if he's going to get better or worse. But at least in the last 2 weeks that he's been hospitalized, we are seeing some slight improvements, Vlad.
All right, Chris, as you perhaps know, this morning, Vice President J.D. Vance responded to the Pope's recent criticism about the Trump administration's immigration policy. I want to play some of that.
The Holy Father, Pope Francis, has criticized some of our policies when it comes to immigration. I think it's incumbent upon our religious leaders to recognize that in the era of social media, people will hang on every single word that they utter, even if that wasn't their intention, and even if a given declaration wasn't meant for consumption in the social media age.
All right, he qualified his remarks by saying he's been praying, J.D. Vance has, for the Pope every day. What do we think of what the Vatican is going to make of that? A politician, how unheard of, a politician who uses their faith and wears it on their sleeve to win votes is all of a sudden upset that the religious leader of said religion takes umbrage to policies that they believe to be not in the full faith of that said religion.
Yeah, that's if I had to guess, I would wager that the Vatican isn't going to comment on it more, especially while Pope Francis is in the hospital. Of course, Pope Francis understands the value of social media. He's on X, in fact, in several languages, English, French, Spanish, etc. He's also on Instagram. He's done more with social media than any of his predecessors. But in addition to that, if you want to talk about followers, he has 1.4 billion of them in the Catholic Church. I think he's used to people hanging on his every word, and I don't think it was any mistake that Pope Francis would comment on immigration. It's something that's very dear to his heart. When he was first named Pope in 2013, the very first papal trip he went on was to the island of Lampedusa in southern Italy, very close to the Middle East, close to Tunisia, specifically to talk to migrants and refugees during the refugee crisis that was raging in the aftermath of the wars in Iraq and Syria. So I don't think Pope Francis was reckless in his comments, or let me say, I don't think he thought he was being reckless in those comments. I think Pope Francis knew exactly what he was doing by commenting on the Trump administration's immigration policy. Vlad.
I mean, I would agree that that's probably accurate, Chris, given that this Pope has used social media ever since conclave. So the fact that a young vice president is lecturing a Pope about the use of social media, hey, Grandpa, be careful of what you tweet. People may take umbrage with that. I think it's pretty funny. All right, Chris Livesay for us at the Vatican. Good to talk to you this morning, my friend. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Vlad. Me too.
All right, New Jersey, the latest state to issue a measles alert. 3 cases of the highly contagious virus were detected in the northern part of the state. These latest cases come just days after the U.S. saw its first measles-related death in a decade. CBS News New York reporter Christy Kalishian has the details of how New Jersey state officials are responding.
The New Jersey State Department of Health reports as many as 3 measles cases now in the state. They say that it started with one person who was unvaccinated that came back from an international trip and infected 2 others who were also unvaccinated and in quarantine with them at the time. They say that anybody who was here at Inglewood Hospital on February 9th between 11:30 a.m. and 5:30 p.m. reach out to a doctor. And this comes as there are at least 124 cases of the measles across Texas, killing 1 child. And the NIH says that there needs to be a 92% vaccination rate in order to achieve herd immunity. And health experts also say that particles in the air from an infected person who may have coughed or sneezed can linger up in the air for up to 2 hours after that person leaves. In Inglewood, New Jersey, Christy Kalishian, CBS News, New York.
Christy, thank you very much. The deaths of Gene Hackman and his wife were deemed suspicious enough to prompt an investigation. Coming up, we're going to tell you what we know about when officials believe they died. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. The Department of Justice says 29 suspected members of a violent drug cartel are now in U.S. custody after being handed over by authorities in Mexico. That includes a drug lord linked to the torture and murder of a DEA agent back in the 1980s. I want to bring in CBS News Homeland Security correspondent Nicole Skanga. Nicole, even the DOJ said there's one name that stands out from the rest. Tell me more about Rafael Caro Quintero.
Yeah. Vlad, that's exactly right. Caro Quintero's transfer is notable. We're talking about the co-founder and leader of the Guadalajara cartel, a man that has been on the DEA and FBI's most wanted list for over 4 decades for the suspected kidnapping and murder of a DEA agent. Back in 1985, his name was Enrique or Kiki Camarena. This murder, one of the bloodiest chapters in the narco wars. If you've ever seen the Netflix series Narcos, you likely know about it. And Caro Quintero was released from Mexican prison after 28 years on a technicality in 2013, then recaptured nearly a decade later by the Mexican Navy. That operation resulting in the deaths of 14 Marines in a helicopter crash. And ever since then, the U.S. has wanted the drug lord and cartel leader extradited to the United States. But this is the biggest handover in 10 years. There are 28 others extradited, members of 5 of the 6 Mexican organized crime groups.
How did this transfer come about?
Yeah, timing is really everything here, Vlad. The Trump administration has been launching a pressure campaign on Mexico, threatening a 25% tariff on Mexican goods starting Tuesday. That move, President Trump says, is to hold Mexico accountable for its role in failing to stem the flow of drugs and migrants over the border. So, call it a peace offering of sorts or maybe a last-ditch effort by Mexico. But speaking of timing, we mentioned those Mexican crime groups that these individuals belong to, among them the Sinaloa, the Jalisco New Generation cartel. They were actually designated by the Trump administration as foreign terrorist organizations just last week.
So what happens next, Nicole?
Yeah, Vlad, these 29 individuals, they were flown from just north of Mexico City. They're now detained at prisons in 8 different U.S. cities, some of them wanted in multiple states. They face charges including racketeering, drug trafficking, murder, illegal use of firearms, money laundering. As for Caro Quintero, he's set to be arraigned today in federal court in New York. He'll actually appear at the same Brooklyn courthouse where Sinaloa boss El Chapo was convicted on drug trafficking charges back in 2019. And, while it remains to be seen, is likely to face a similar fate. Vlad.
All right. Nicole's going to go with those late-breaking details for us. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you.
Police in New Mexico say the circumstances surrounding the deaths of Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa, appear suspicious enough to warrant an investigation. The couple was found dead Wednesday in their home just outside of Santa Fe, New Mexico. And that's where we find CBS News reporter Karen Hua. So, Karen, what are you learning about the investigation? It's so fascinating to us that initially officials told us that there was no suspicion of foul play. Now they're sort of, is it fair to say, walking it back, or is that still their contention?
Well, Vlad, we're in front of the sheriff's office right now, and it seems that the more information we get, the more mysterious this case becomes. As far as what we know so far, officials, like you said, first showed up to the couple's home on Wednesday when a maintenance person was trying to get in touch with the couple, but was unable to do so, never got a response. Officials ultimately found Hackman's body in the mudroom, saying he had possibly fallen, whereas they found his wife, Betsy Arakawa's body, in the bathroom next to a space heater that was next to her head. They also also found a prescription pill bottle on the counter as well as pills scattered throughout. They aren't yet sharing what exactly those kind of pills were. As for the dogs, unfortunately, there was a dog who had passed away that was locked in the kennel next to Arakawa's body. The two other dogs that they found alive were freely roaming around the property.
So, Karen, I'm also intrigued. On CBS Mornings earlier, myself and my co-hosts, Gail King and Tony DeCopel, were intrigued by the detail that the police keep suggesting or saying to reporters, which is that Gene Hackman's wife's head was near a space heater. Have you gotten any clarity as to why that is so, why that detail keeps coming up?
Well, Vlad, that specific detail is still unclear yet. We haven't yet gotten the autopsy or toxicology report to find out the exact cause of death, so that detail about the space heater is still yet to be determined. What we know so far, though, the sheriff is saying the autopsy shows no signs of external traumatic injuries and no sign of foul play. The court documents say there was no obvious sign of a gas leak or carbon monoxide poisoning, but officials are not ruling anything out. Because their bodies were found partly mummified and decomposed, the sheriff said it's likely they were dead for a week or 2 weeks before they were actually found. So again, some details still very unclear here. We are expecting to get an update, a press conference from the sheriff's office later on this afternoon, where we can hopefully get those answers for everyone.
All right, Karen Watt for us outside of the sheriff's office in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Thanks for your reporting, Karen. Coming up, what we know about the Jeffrey Epstein-related documents that may soon be released by the Department of Justice. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Here's a look at some of the top stories we're following for you this morning. A school bus near Cleveland caught fire, and amazingly, no one was hurt. Bus driver is being hailed as a hero. Firefighters say the driver jumped quickly into action to get all 15 middle school students off the bus and to safety. The cause of the fire is under investigation. Schools across the U.S. are up against a deadline today to end DEI programs or risk losing federal money. The Trump administration sent a memo 2 weeks ago instructing schools to halt any diversity and inclusion practices. And ahead of today's deadline, the Education Department launched an NDEI website to serve as a means for community members to lodge discrimination-focused complaints. Attorney General Pam Bondi has vowed to release information about sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. A group consisting of 15 conservative media influencers visited the White House yesterday and left with binders labeled The Epstein Files Phase 1. Some who received the binder said that there wasn't much new information in those files. Bondi later released a statement saying the first phase is made up of documents that have been leaked but never formally released by the government. One influencer said the paperwork contained flight logs and Epstein's contacts. We're just about a half hour away from a critical meeting at the White House. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy and President Donald Trump will meet to sign a deal to grant U.S. access to Ukraine's rare minerals. President Trump pledges to work with Zelenskyy despite criticisms calling him a dictator just days ago. CBS News senior foreign correspondent Holly Williams is live from London and joins me now. All right, Holly, so Zelenskyy rejected earlier versions of the agreement. He's been pushing for security guarantees. Is there a chance that this deal could change throughout the course of the morning?
Good morning, Vlad. Well, the short answer to that is, I don't know. But what I can tell you is that it is very clear that President Trump and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy have starkly different viewpoints on several things. And we've seen that earlier this month when President Trump called Zelenskyy a dictator and Zelenskyy accused Trump of repeating disinformation. Now, the deal that is apparently going to be signed later on today reportedly involves a jointly managed investment fund to which Ukraine will contribute 50% of future revenues from natural resources, including minerals and hydrocarbons. Now, President Trump has framed that as a way for Ukraine to compensate the U.S. For aid that it has given Ukraine during the war. But Zelenskyy has reiterated this week that what Ukraine wants is security guarantees from the U.S. And in particular, it wants to make sure that the supply of American weapons to Ukraine will not stop. Now, what do we mean by security guarantees? As part of any ceasefire deal, which President Trump is very keen on negotiating with Vladimir Putin, Ukraine and its European allies want to make sure that it's not just a pause in fighting with Russia Russia reinvading a few years down the line. They want to make another invasion by Russia very unappealing for Moscow. Now, one security guarantee could be NATO membership, but the US says it won't support that. Another could be peacekeeping forces, and the UK says that it would contribute troops to that if there's a ceasefire deal. But the British Prime Minister says that there needs to be a US backstop. That is, there needs to be some kind of US involvement. The Trump administration has argued that security guarantees should really be the job of Europe. There are clearly anxieties about that both in Ukraine and more broadly here in Europe.
All right, Holly Williams for us, breaking it down as only she can. Holly, as always, we appreciate it. Thank you very much. An investigation by Israel's military into Hamas's deadly October 7th attacks in November 2023 has found it misjudged the militant group's intentions and underestimated its capabilities. Now, the report comes as mediators seek to move talks forward on phase 2 of the ceasefire agreement. Our Deborah Pata has more from Jerusalem.
Egypt says officials from Israel, Qatar and the United States have begun intensive discussions on the Gaza ceasefire second phase in Cairo, averting a collapse of the 6-week truce. Mediators have been discussing ways to increase desperately needed humanitarian aid to Gaza, where many Palestinians are still living in makeshift tents and bombed out buildings with no protection from the icy winter weather. Phase 2 talks have entered a sensitive stage. They are meant to negotiate a permanent ceasefire, the release of the remaining living hostages in Gaza, and the withdrawal of all Israeli troops from there. The bodies of Israeli captives will only be returned in phase 3 of the deal. According to Israel, there are still 59 hostages. 24 are believed to be alive. Just hours before talks began, an Israeli official said the country would not withdraw from a strategic corridor in Gaza, which could complicate the negotiations. President Trump believes the U.S. has already had a huge impact on Gaza. He said it was a tough neighborhood that could be a very beautiful one, and I quote, "I think we're going to come up with some pretty good solutions." Back to you.
All right, Deborah Pata for us this morning. Thank you. The Iowa Senate has advanced a bill removing transgender people from protection under the state's Civil Rights Code. The same bill passed the House, leaving it up to the governor, that's Kim Reynolds, to decide if it becomes law. The vote happened after an emotional day of testimony and debate. One protester was even carried out of the chamber. CBS News correspondent Lana Zak is live in Iowa City this morning for us. Lana, good to see you. But this was an emotionally charged vote. Lawmakers were split down party lines. So what are you hearing from the people who actually showed up at the Capitol?
You're absolutely right, Vlad. Emotional, to say the least. And I was speaking to the director of One Iowa, an advocacy group that is opposed to the passage of this bill. He said that this was the single largest protest that the State House has ever seen here in Iowa. Take a listen to some of what was said.
Civil rights are the most important thing aside from air and water. So I'm just devastated by what they're trying to do. I feel it's mean, I feel it's hateful, I feel it's childish and ignorant.
You have a government that if you don't like someone or something, you get rid of it. We're human. We're human beings.
2,500 people were estimated to be at the Capitol yesterday, and now the bill has passed both the House and the Senate, so it heads over to Governor Kim Reynolds' desk, and we expect that she's going to sign it. But this is a major move because this is the first time in American history that a state has voted to remove protections from any protected class. That's never happened before, Vlad, so it sets the stage for the fights that we're going to see ahead.
So let's talk about the fights that we'll see ahead, Lana. We know how it's already going to impact folks in Iowa. What about other Midwestern states?
Well, you'll remember that Iowa, in many ways, is a bellwether. Back in 2007, which was when gender identity and sexual preference was added to the state's civil rights, gay marriage wasn't allowed nationwide. Iowa was the first state outside of the Northeast corridor, Massachusetts and Connecticut, to allow for gay marriage. And that set the stage for other states and ultimately the United States of America to allow that right. And so the proponents of keeping LGBTQ plus protections enshrined in the Civil Rights Act here say that this is not only going to affect Iowans here, but it will have an effect nationwide because other states will respond to what we're doing. But I also want to underscore part of why this is so important. We have been hearing nationwide, whether it's at the federal level or at the state level, that there is legislation that's being debated, proposed, in some cases passed already, to try and limit bathroom access or who should play on sports teams. And as all of that's happening, the only way that that can successfully move forward is if there is not these protections. And so the argument is that without these protections in there, the courts will not be able to overturn this legislation, and that is part of why it has these national ramifications.
All right, Lana Zach reporting from Iowa City, Iowa for us this morning. Lana, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Stay warm.
Thanks, Len.
The latest round of federal layoffs is hitting the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, better known as NOAA. Hundreds of staffers responsible for monitoring severe weather were fired from the agency. A congressional source told CBS News the cuts affected nearly 900 employees, or an estimated 5% of its workforce. Let's bring in CBS News New York meteorologist John Elliott with the first look at the national forecast. John, good to see you.
See that beautiful view there in Iowa. Lovely in Iowa. It looked
beautiful there. Cold, but...
Yeah, so we're setting our sights on meteorological spring. For many, March will come in like a lammy.
That's what they say.
And then it's a whammy.
Oh,
I mean,
boy.
we're going to see some big changes. So let's go to the big board and show you what we're up against. So I just want to show you real quickly. We do have some systems that are going to push through the area. These are Alberta clippers. What is an Alberta clipper? It's not a Saskatchewan screamer or a Manitoba mauler. This is an area low pressure that basically comes out of Alberta, and it's an organized area low pressure that is going to scream into the northern states. As it does, on the flip side of the precipitation, as this organized low gets going, wind is going to be an issue. One of our concerns is the millions of folks that are going to be under wind advisories, really from Cleveland all the way to Bismarck, 30, 40, 50-mile-an-hour winds. Some local National Weather Service offices and state DEPs are concerned about fire weather. Any fire that starts would spread quickly with that kind of scenario. What kind of output, what kind of moisture or snow are we going to see out of this clipper? Much of this will stay in parts of Ontario, but some of the resorts in the East Coast, you're going to be digging it because you love the snow. As far as snow totals, it's the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, Whitefish Bay, Sault Ste. Marie, beautiful, but you're going to see almost a foot of snow. Other than that, for many, it's a nuisance, but it also speaks to some very cold air. Needed moisture over the next few days, as many of these areas are in drought conditions. But, wow, get ready for the changes temperature-wise. There's cool air in the Rockies, delightful departures, beautiful Atlanta, Dallas. Watch the blue on the screen, take a dive, and push to the south. We are going to see a cold weekend, and then next week, see how we get ahead of ourselves? Next week, we're actually going to see a recovery. But as you get ready for the weekend, I just want to say, tomorrow in New York, it's going to be almost 60 degrees. Very exciting to Vlad. And then, get ready for this, kids, because when you wake up on Sunday morning, the wind chill in New York about 15.
Well, I'm not going to go out then.
Okay,
not going to step out of the house on Sunday, but tomorrow we're going to take the kid to there's like a kiddie party or something that babies do. I don't know.
And then when you take out Mrs. Vlad, make sure you dress for the chill. Have fun with the kids, and then if you're going out tomorrow night, I mean, wind chills for much of the east will be well below freezing.
Oh boy! All right. Hermit crab Vlad on Sunday. John Elliott, love having you in the studio. Thank you, my friend. Let's talk about Panama. They are facing a unique migration problem coming up. What exactly is reverse migration and why the nation points the finger at President Trump? You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Panama has been facing a new migration trend it's referring to as reverse migration. The country usually sees migrants head north with the goal of reaching the United States, but now migrants are making their way south. And many of them are from Venezuela, a country Panama does not have a great diplomatic relationship with. CBS News correspondent Lily Luciano joins me now from Studio 57. So, Lily, good to see you. You spoke with the Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs for Panama. What did he say about this reverse migration issue?
Well, Vlad, as you know, I like to look at the issue of immigration just throughout the whole region. Tonight on the CBS Evening News, I'm talking to DHS about the Trump policies that are actually pushing this movement of people who used to go north, now moving south. Let's listen to what Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs, Carlos Ruiz Hernandez, told me, and I'll bring more context into that.
Yeah, I think this reverse migration phenomena that's about to start, it's brand new. It's something that we started dealing with very recently, as of last week. We are getting this influx of migrants coming in. So, and what they want is to go to Colombia. Yeah. They can't to go to Venezuela. They can walk back through the Darien Gap and go through this treacherous, and we cannot let them do that.
So here's what's really interesting, Vlad, in particular to Panama. Panama does not have a diplomatic relation with Venezuela. The majority of the people that they're encountering, he says hundreds of people now in their northern border. It used to be people coming from the south, from countries like Venezuela, up towards the U.S. Now they're coming back. He says it is because of the Trump policies. It is because of the deportation. It is because of the loss of the CBP-1 app that gave people a possibility, an opportunity, and an appointment to make their case for asylum. They don't have a diplomatic relation with Venezuela, so they cannot repatriate people to Venezuela. They're trying to send them to Colombia and have the migrants cross from Colombia to Venezuela. But Colombia is saying, we're dealing with our own deportees. We are dealing with our own issues. We're not going to be receiving Venezuelans from any country, not from the U.S. and not from Panama. So Panama is trying to figure out, what to do with the people who are trying to return now to their country.
So let me ask you a question. Did the Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs address the 300 or so migrants sent from the U.S. that were reportedly stuck in a Panamanian hotel?
He did. I asked him about that. And I also asked, is this going to be a trend? Are you going to be repatriating a lot of immigrants from the U.S.? And he said, no, this was kind of a unique thing. It was something like 3 airplanes. They received around 300 people, or nearly 300. He said the majority of them had accepted to self-deport. But we saw earlier this week the reporting from the New York Times that found that there were people from Iran who were going to be religiously persecuted if they went back to their country, they said, that they were in fear for their lives. There were Chinese migrants who said that they were afraid of political persecution. And so I asked them, what are you going to do with these people who are afraid and who say they have a claim for refugee status or asylum? And he said, look, there are resources there, and UNHCR is going to be there to provide those resources or access or begin that process with them. We're going to, of course, follow up and see where that stands in several weeks. But it is kind of a new and unique situation that Panama finds itself in after reaching these deals that, as you know, some of them had already started with the Biden administration. Panama's relations with the U.S. funding their repatriation flights. But some are new because or following President Trump's threats on the Panama Canal. It is a lot of geopolitics happening there in the point that unites North and South America and Central America.
Yeah, really fascinating, Lilia, and I'm absolutely looking forward to the report tonight on the CBS Evening News. Thank you very much for spending some time with us. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Vlad.
All right, New Orleans is gearing up for Mardi Gras. We're going to go there live next with a look at how the city is planning to keep crowds safe. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. The celebration of Mardi Gras already has a very different feel in New Orleans this year. There's been plenty of partying in the streets, of course, but there will also be an added sense of security. It has been just under 2 months, of course, since that New Year's Day attack on Bourbon Street. CBS News reporter Katie Weiss is in New Orleans and joins me now to talk about it. Katie, you were there during that terrorist attack. You covered it, and you were also there for the Super Bowl. Just talk to us about the security precautions in the wake of that horrific attack.
Well, good morning, Vlad. Yes, that attack is something that really shook the Big Easy and has changed the way that this city parties moving forward, I think, for many years to come. And we're going to see that evidenced with Mardi Gras really heating up this weekend. You know, it's an event that happens for a couple months, starting in early January. And this weekend will gear up right into Fat Tuesday, this coming up Tuesday. We're going to be seeing parades here along this route, right where I'm standing, all evening tonight, all day tomorrow, all day Sunday on Mardi Gras, and then again on Tuesday for Fat Tuesday, or Mardi Gras Day, as they call it down here. The big thing about the historic level of security that we're seeing this year is that Mardi Gras is actually rated a Tier 1 level event. That's the highest level of security rating that the government can assign a national event because of its national security significance. And because of that, we're going to be seeing some serious support, some new gear and equipment here. As you can see here to the side of me, this is a 3-mile-long barricade course, a serpentine course that has been set up for the first time ever along this major parade route. So normally when a parade is coming through here, the parade will come here down this side of the road here, and where I'm standing and over here is a pedestrian-only zone. And the idea is to slow anyone down who may want to try to, carry out an attack. In fact, the police chief is quoted as saying that this serpentine course here will, quote, slow down anybody who thinks they're going to use their vehicle as a weapon. So very much geared as a reaction to what we saw in the terrifying events of January 1st on Bourbon Street. And then beyond just, sheer barricades, we're also going to be seeing a lot more boots on the ground type support. 25 different law enforcement agencies are coming into town to support the already 900 police officers here in the city that are going to be around patrolling. In fact, I was here just last weekend for a parade and saw several of those officers on the ground.
Wow. All right. Katie, thank you very much for that reporting. We'll check in with you throughout the course of Mardi Gras. Appreciate it. Take a look at this. What was once the world's tallest and fastest roller coaster is nothing but rubble. The King de Ka. Is that how I'm saying it?
Yeah, that's right. You got it.
King de Ka.
King de Ka.
King de Ka Ka.
No.
Oh, it says King de Ka Ka.
It's King de Ka.
King de Ka.
There you go.
King de Ka.
Yeah, you got it.
King de Ka coaster at Six Flags Great Adventure in Jackson, New Jersey, stood at nearly 500 feet tall and carried thrill seekers at speeds of up to 128 miles an hour. It was demolished this morning to make way for a newer, more high-profile ride. One expected to debut later this year, the other in 2026. I've never been, John. So, John,
well, the thing is that the weird thing is, because I know KYW was going to send a chopper, but somebody got the memo wrong. The park said they were going to blow it up later, and then all of a sudden we're looking at it and they blew it up. I don't know what the deal was, the timing here. And then I was talking to Gail King. She's upset because she wanted to use it as a trial run for going into space. Gail was very excited about King de Ka, but they're building an even better one. That is, Six Flags is amazing.
I love it. I love the name. I have no idea what it means. But
you just fall like that. Hey, I want to follow up on Mardi Gras because you know what starts this weekend around New York, and I know the East Coast. Some communities are starting their St. Patrick's Day parades this weekend. I know. Come on, we run out of time. So I just want to remind you, it is going to be very, very cold this weekend as we set our sights on Sunday. And now I want to talk a little bit about Monday because there's kind of a battle brewing that you need to know about. See all that cold air that's slipping south of the Ohio Valley? So it's going to be still nice in the south central states, but with that lift and that battle zone, got to let you know, early next week, potential for severe weather. I know, here comes March, and here comes the risk of heavy rain, thunderstorms, tornadoes with hail and damaging winds. So be careful. First part of next week. Till then, just stay warm this weekend and think King de Ka thoughts. Right?
I will be thinking, although you're talking about St. Patty's Day, I just feel like we just finished SantaCon.
I'm sorry.
It's my worst time in New York.
I don't make the rules.
John Elliott, love having you here in the studio, my friend. Thank you very much. That does it for me, folks. Stay right where you are. After the break, Mugo Adiwe is live from San Francisco with all the news. And just a few minutes, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is set to meet with President Trump. There's a live shot at the White House where he's expected. We're going to keep an eye on that. Stick around. This is CBS News 24/7.